The unexpected always causes astonishment. When someone breaks patterns, defies expectations, or dares to walk an unforeseen path, reactions range from surprise to outrage, and often collective madness. But what does this shock in the face of the unpredictable really mean? Carl Jung, throughout his work, explored the human psyche and the profound influence of the collective unconscious on our lives. This unconscious is like an invisible ocean connecting humanity through archetypes, narratives, and deeply rooted beliefs. So, when someone makes an unexpected decision, one that deviates from the socially accepted script, it's not just a personal expectation that is broken, but a pillar of that collective unconscious. And that disruption is unsettling. Imagine someone who, against all odds, abandons a safe path to follow an inner calling. Maybe a successful professional who decides to leave everything behind for a simpler life, a child who challenges family expectations, or an artist who refuses to follow commercial trends in order to create something authentic. What happens? Society reacts, first with shock, then with denial, and often with anger. This happens because people project their own limitations onto others. When someone does the unthinkable and sets themselves free, it exposes the invisible chains holding back those who stayed behind. As Jung teaches us, human beings are constantly confronted by their own shadow, the repressed aspects of the psyche they refuse to face. When an individual challenges norms and expectations, they force others to look at that shadow, and that is uncomfortable. But there is something even more unsettling in this equation: the transformative power of the individual who acts in alignment with their self. Jung distinguished between the ego, the conscious identity adapted to the world, and the self, which is the totality of one's being, including its unconscious parts. Individuation, the central process in Jungian psychology, is precisely about this: becoming who you truly are, regardless of external expectations. When someone takes an unexpected action, but one that is deeply aligned with their essence, they become a catalyst for transformation, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. This is why others react so intensely. They don't know how to handle the possibility that their own lives could be different. And the madness that emerges isn't just figurative. Throughout history, those who broke patterns were often seen as insane, heretics, revolutionaries, or dangerous visionaries. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth with his questions. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for challenging the dogmatic view of the universe. Even today, those who dare to defy conventions face boycotts, cancellations, and retaliation. And yet, they went. They did. And the world was never the same. But what about you? Have you ever felt the call to go beyond what was expected of you? If so, be prepared. When you go, many will lose their minds. The madness of others in response to your freedom reveals more about them than it does about you. Collective hysteria, when someone challenges norms, is not just resistance to external change. It's a reflection of internal fear. Carl Jung spoke about the process of individuation, the journey of the individual toward wholeness, toward the true self. This path is not just about personal choices, but about breaking illusions that uphold our collective identity. And whenever someone dares to walk toward themselves, they become an uncomfortable mirror for those still trapped behind the masks of conformity. The fear of freedom is nothing new. Erich Fromm, in his book Escape from Freedom, argued that while most people claim to want autonomy, they flee from it whenever possible. Being free means taking full responsibility for your choices, and that is terrifying. Many prefer a preordained path because it offers the illusion of security. When someone escapes this trap, they don't just defy norms, they shatter the comfortable lie others tell themselves, that there is no other way out. This is why, when you make an unexpected decision, when you act with radical authenticity, the collective reaction can be extreme. It's a reflection of a deep psychological mechanism, projection. People project their fears, frustrations, and insecurities onto those who dare. How many times have you seen someone judged for chasing an improbable dream? How many times has an artist been ridiculed before being recognized? How many stories of triumph began with disbelief and mockery? This pattern repeats because defying expectations inevitably means challenging the collective unconscious that keeps us imprisoned. Jung said that each individual carries not only their personal history, but also the ancestral weight of humanity. This means that in freeing yourself, you are not just breaking your own limitations, you are challenging patterns that have existed for centuries. That is frightening, that is infuriating, but above all, that is liberating. The price of authenticity is the resistance of those who do not understand, but the reward is something far greater, a real life. So the question is not just why others lose their minds when you do the unexpected, but rather, why should you care? The short answer? You shouldn't. The long answer? Of course you'll care, at least at first, because we are social beings wired to seek acceptance, belonging, and validation. From childhood, we learn that fitting in means safety. The problem is that this desire for acceptance often turns us into prisoners of expectations we never consciously chose. Jung spoke about the persona complex, the set of masks we wear to adapt to society. They are necessary to some extent because no one can live entirely on the margins. However, when the persona becomes more important than the true self, we lose touch with who we really are, and eventually, this false self becomes a prison. When someone decides to break away from this predetermined role and act in alignment with their essence, the first battle is not against others, but against themselves. The fear of judgment, rejection, loneliness, all of it rises like internal ghosts, trying to keep us in our comfort zone. But the great irony is that the more we adjust to external expectations, the further we drift from what would actually make us feel alive. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described this as the sickness unto death, a state of existence where a person pretends to be someone they are not, suffocating their true essence. According to him, the worst kind of despair is not knowing you are unhappy, but living without realizing you have lost yourself. And this is why, when someone wakes up and decides to go, they trigger extreme reactions. Because for many, seeing someone live with authenticity is a painful reminder of their own stagnation. They may try to ridicule, minimize, or attack your choice, but deep down, what bothers them isn't you. It's their own cowardice for not having done the same. But here's the secret. After the initial resistance, after the shock and collective madness, something changes. History shows us that, over time, what once seemed unthinkable becomes a reference. What was once absurd becomes an inspiration. The madmen of yesterday are the visionaries of today. And ironically, many of the same people who doubted, mocked, or criticized will eventually find themselves wondering, what if I could do it too? That's when the cycle reverses. Those who once laughed or rebelled may at some point try to follow the same path. Not all will have the courage, but some will be moved by your journey. And without you even realizing it, your boldness will have become a beacon for those still living in the shadows of conformity. So, if you've already gone, if you've already done the unthinkable, and they lost their minds, maybe that's a sign you're exactly where you're meant to be. The question now is, how far are you willing to go? If you've made it this far, you already understand that the journey to becoming who you truly are is not easy. But the point isn't the difficulty, it's the necessity. Carl Jung said that individuation is not a luxury, but a demand of the psyche itself. The self, this totality of being, calls. And those who ignore that call pay a high price: existential emptiness, the feeling of being out of place, the weight of a life without meaning. But those who answer the call face a different kind of challenge. The world does not favor those who defy the norm. There's a reason so many live on autopilot, following patterns they never questioned. Social stability depends on predictability, on everyone playing their roles without asking too many questions. Jung spoke about the hero archetype, a figure who ventures into the unknown, faces trials, and returns transformed. But there's something many forget about this archetype. Before the hero is recognized, they are always rejected. Buddha abandoned the palace and was seen as mad. Jesus was betrayed and crucified. Nietzsche died alone and misunderstood. The list goes on. And why does this happen? Because challenging norms is threatening. Those who step out of Plato's cave, who see reality beyond the shadows on the wall, become strangers to those still chained inside. But here's the interesting part. Over time, many who reject and ridicule the new are ultimately transformed by it. Once the initial resistance fades, what was once seen as a threat becomes an inspiration. The problem is that to reach that point, one must endure the initial chaos, the misunderstanding, the resistance, the fear of others. Nietzsche spoke about the concept of the Übermensch, the human who transcends society's imposed limitations and creates their own values. But before reaching that stage, one must pass through the phase of the camel, who carries the burdens of the world, and the lion, who breaks the chains of the past. Only after these stages can one become the child, the symbol of free creation, the rebirth of true essence. What does this mean for you? That maybe the chaos around you isn't a sign that you're on the wrong path, but proof that you are finally becoming free. So the question remains, now that you've gone, now that you've done it, now that you've shattered expectations, what comes next? Because the most interesting part is this: once you challenge the norm, there's no going back. Once you cross the threshold of your old identity, there's no going back to who you were before. Something inside you has changed. You've seen the truth behind the illusions, tasted freedom, and realized just how fragile your former chains really were. But this transition isn't just psychological. It manifests in the world around you. You start to notice certain people drifting away, not because you did anything to them, but because your transformation challenges them. Those who are deeply tied to convention often struggle to be around someone who dared to be different. Your existence becomes an uncomfortable reminder of everything they fear facing. Jung called this phenomenon shadow projection. When someone refuses to confront their own inner darkness, they project it onto others. That's why those who break free are often demonized. They become targets for the frustration and fear of those still trapped. But here's the key: that's not your problem. The path of individuation cannot be walked while carrying the weight of external validation. Those who step into the unknown must accept that, at some point, they will walk alone. That is the price of authenticity. But solitude doesn't last forever. Something interesting happens after the dust of that initial rupture settles. New connections emerge. You begin to attract people who resonate with this new version of yourself. People who see your journey not as a threat, but as an inspiration. And this is where a fascinating cycle begins. The one who was once seen as insane becomes a reference. What was once an anomaly becomes a model. The impossible becomes possible. Because individual transformation is never just individual. Every time someone frees themselves, they create the possibility for others to do the same. As Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And awakening is contagious. Perhaps the greatest irony is this: those who once laughed, criticized, or resented your choices may, in time, seek your advice. They may want to understand how you did it, what you learned, what you discovered. Not all will have the courage to follow the same path, but many will be touched by your journey. And so the final question arises: what will you do with this? Now that you've gone, now that you've done it, now that you've shattered expectations and watched the world go mad, the next step is in your hands. Because the real challenge isn't just breaking free from the old, it's what you build after. And that's where the journey truly begins. Now tell me, where are you watching this video from? I want to know which corner of the world my voice is reaching. And since you've made it this far, it means something in this video resonated with you. So how about continuing this journey with me? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more coming your way. And who knows, maybe the next step in your transformation starts in the next video. Leave a comment letting me know where you're from and how this video made you feel. Let's talk.